Is this the week that we should finally expect a vintage George Kittle performance? That and much, much more on today's episode of the Launchpad. I'm joined with two awesome guests today, and we are going to jump into the games with some insight on those games and the fantasy relevant players in them. I'm joined with Eric Crocker and Marco Enriquez. Eric, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself? Let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter, social media, and what you got going on nowadays.
Yeah, Eric Crocker, former NFL and AFL defensive back. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Eric_Crocker. Uh, man, yeah, on YouTube, Croc Talk TV. On YouTube, I have a YouTube channel. And if you follow the 49ers, you like the 49ers, that's definitely something you should be into. But I have guests on sometimes. I've had a few NFL guys on there. But yeah, that's kind of where you can find me.
And I got a lot of questions on the 49ers, man. We're going to talk a little bit about Kittle and his slow start. We're going to talk about Ayuk. We're going to talk about this backfield and try to figure some of those things out in just a little bit. Before we do that, though, Marco, you and I have done quite a few shows together, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience and let them know where they can find you as well?
Yeah. Way less cool introduction for me. But I am one of the hosts over at 14 Personnel. I do some work over at Dynasty Nerds as well. And I recently started ranking over at Fantasy Pro. So you can always find me on Twitter at Marco_14P or at our YouTube at 14 Personnel.
Yeah, and you can check out the show that we did just a few days ago where we were complaining about our hometown Bears and just that awful game plan that we saw get rolled out last week. But I want to start off with George Kittle because that's something right now, from a football standpoint, George Kittle is balling out, looking like one of the best tight ends in the league. From a fantasy football standpoint, he's doing a lot more blocking, and that doesn't translate to fantasy football points. So, Eric, help us out a little bit here. What should we expect from George Kittle? Is this just what he's going to be doing, staying in line, blocking a lot more, or is he going to get out there and start running some more routes?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I was completely against how they've been utilizing him, especially through the first two games. I think somebody of his caliber and his ability to separate, get open, I think people, because he's such a good blocker, that's what people think that he's just that, right? Or he lacks in other areas, and he doesn't. Maybe early in his career when he's coming out of Iowa, but now he's a terrific route runner, has good hands, he can separate, and obviously we know what he can do after the catch. So the fact that they haven't been really utilizing him in all areas of the field has been a head scratcher for me as well. And I'm like, man, that's a guy who should 100% get at least 8 targets a game. And I think he got 9 last game, but that really hasn't been the case for the majority of the season so far through 3 games.
And I think such a frustrating thing, too, is that he gets no looks inside the red zone. He's running routes, but Jimmy G, Trey Lance, they aren't even looking his way. You see this guy get wide open in the end zone, and he's like begging for the ball, and they aren't even going his direction. So it's frustrating to see. And that's kind of been the theme with the 49ers is they have all of this talent on there, but we haven't seen any sort of consistency. So, Marco, I'm going to throw another 49ers question to you. We saw Brandon Ayuk last week finally kind of come back and start getting some targets, and he was out there doing his thing. So does Deebo Samuel still have any sort of value in fantasy football now, or are these guys just going to completely cap each other's upside?
I mean, they might cap each other's upside a little bit, but I think one of the cool things about Deebo and Ayuk is when they can be used really, really well together. Like Deebo is one of those guys that they can move around the formation. They can get really creative with how they use him. We've seen that quite a bit. And sure, with Ayuk getting this weird usage in the beginning, Deebo's been feeling like that big, number one alpha guy role, but he can do so much more than that. And he is like a true playmaker. So I think this team's better when they use these guys in creative ways and they use them together rather than like, oh, okay, it's Deebo's game today, or okay, it's Ayuk's game today.
And that would make sense. Like you think that these guys would be able to coexist, but it seems like every week they go in where Kyle Shanahan's plan is like, we are going to scheme Brandon Ayuk open and we're going to get him the ball, or we're going to scheme George Kittle open. We're going to scheme Deebo Samuel. It's not like they ever have big games together. It's always one of those three. So Eric, do you have any insight into this as to maybe how these guys are going to be able to coexist through the season?
I think the tough thing is the 49ers is just not a high volume passing offense. So they do a lot of misdirections. They're going to do a lot of screens. They're going to get the ball into Kyle Juszczyk's hands, who we saw catch the go-ahead touchdown last game, but obviously ended up losing. It's unfortunate. But,
you can't give Aaron Rodgers any time back, man. You can't give the ball to Aaron Rodgers. You can't do it. I'm a Bears fan. I've seen it.
I said, great job, Jimmy, but too much time. People were like, too much time is 37 seconds. And I'm like,
that's all he needs.
Too much time for A-Rod somehow. But yeah, I feel like there is no true consistency with who the 49ers get the rock to. if I had to pick between the two from a fantasy standpoint, and I said this before the season, I'll go with Debo Samuel just because it's much easier to just get the ball in his hands in a bunch of different ways, and he's always productive however they utilize him. So from that standpoint, Debo is a guy who, if I had to choose between the two, definitely go with Debo. He's always going to get the route. He's always going to get his touches.
And that's kind of how you and I got connected. I don't know if you remember this, Eric, but I said that I thought Debo was the better fantasy play, and somebody
Yeah.
tagged you in an attempt to try to like clown me, and they're like, "Oh, Crocky, come take a look at this guy," and you were like, "I agree. I think Debo is the better fantasy football play." But
Yeah.
similarly to the 49ers, we've got two fantastic wide receivers on the Seattle Seahawks, and I'm hoping you can give us some insight here with being a quarterback in the NFL, being a D-back. We haven't really seen, even going back to last year, it's very rare that we see Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf both hit on the same week. So if you had to put your money on DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett for this week, which guy do you think is going to be easier to pick on the San Francisco secondary?
That's tough because I feel like they've taken turns.
Mhm.
Just one guy gets off and the other guy shoots. Sometimes it's been both of them. I think if I had to choose between the two, I probably lean more towards DK Metcalf, just because from a physicality standpoint, like the 49ers just have had trouble with him, like
Mhm.
regardless of where he lines up. I mean, even one game they threw like a little 8-yard crossing route and he just outran everybody 50 yards to the end zone. So he's been probably a little bit more of the Achilles heel and been a little bit more of the consistent guy. But Tyler Lockett, I mean, he scored his touchdowns. He's had I don't know if he's had like the big plays downfield against the 49ers, but he's definitely had scored touchdowns. So but yeah, it's been difficult with both of those guys, to be honest.
Yeah, and it seemed like last year they knew what DK Metcalf was going to do. He was running a slant, he was running a go route, and that was pretty much it. But he really did add quite a bit into his skill set this year, and we saw it. Patrick Peterson isn't the same player now that he was 5 years ago, but he put Patrick Peterson on skates and put him on the ground last week with that nice little spin move in his route. So DK Metcalf is looking like a much more polished receiver now than he has in the past. The last thing I want to talk about in this game, though, and I'll throw this one to you, Marco, is Chris Carson, because we have seen this now for 3 straight weeks where Seattle comes out and they are running the ball and they're running the ball well. Going into halftime, you think that Chris Carson's going to have this monster game, and for 3 straight weeks, they have just abandoned the run at halftime. So do you have any insight into this? Do you think that maybe they'll be able to stick with it a little bit more, or is that just kind of what this team is going to keep doing for the rest of the season?
Honestly, what's so crazy is when they brought in this new OC, I thought, okay, he's going to help them not have to deal with this like weird mid-season identity crisis that the Seahawks offense tends to go through, I feel like, for the past few seasons. And now we're not seeing it. We're seeing it like happen in the middle of games, like exactly what you're talking about. Like, okay, this is going to be the run heavy stuff. And I think honestly in this game, it'll be interesting because I'm even curious if they're going to be able to get that running game going against this 49ers defense early. Like it might be something where they don't get it going that early and they have to go to DK. They have to go to Lockett. They have to, hit Gerald Everett. And so I think hitting these guys early might be able to open up the run game, but near the second half rather than what we've seen where he kind of takes over in the first half.
Yeah. So before we move on to the next game, I want predictions on this one. Eric, let's get it from you first. Who you got winning? You got San Francisco or you got Seattle this week?
So I actually went with Seattle. I picked the score 24-17. Now, I hope the 49ers win, and I definitely can give you reasons as to why the 49ers should win or can win. But history shows no matter how Seattle's playing, whether they're good, whether they're bad, Russell Wilson's just kind of been that boogeyman, and Pete Carroll, there's something about him that gets his team up against the 49ers. So I hope 49ers win. But if I had to put money on it, I'd say Seattle, and I'm going 24-17.
I'm with you, man. What about you, Marco? Who you got winning this game?
Yeah, I got the Seahawks too. I don't have a score, but yeah, I think it's just one of those things where, like Eric was saying earlier, man, I think DK might just impose his will a little bit earlier in this game with Russ, and it might just be a nice game for the Seahawks.
Well, let's talk about one other game before we get to the Thursday night matchup, and that is the Detroit Lions coming to Soldier Field to play against the Chicago Bears. And the guy I want to talk about right now is DeAndre Swift, who is just smashing his offseason projections. What people thought he was going to do, like even the people that thought he was going to be good, he's still doing better than even they expected. He's sitting as the RB3 right now in fantasy football, which is great to see. But Now we get word from Dan Campbell that he's going to be starting and that they need to get him the ball more and that he's been the hot hand. So if he's already playing this well, I mean, realistically, what is his ceiling? Marco, start us off here. How good can DeAndre Swift be this year?
Honestly, so man, I've been saying this for a few weeks. I think he's the next coming of the Alvin Kamara. I think that's what he's got. And so even hearing Dan Campbell say he's going to get more work, I wouldn't be surprised if his more work is, instead of like the 55% snap share he's at, goes up to like 60. So it goes up just a little bit, but he's just been so good with the touches he's gotten that it just makes sense to be able to say, hey, we've got two guys. We're going to make sure that Swift is getting involved a little bit more, but he can do great things without us, overloading him with carries and work where he's not going to last the whole season. So I think he's going to be like a Kamara type in this offense. And, Jared Goff just loves dumping the ball off. And so both these guys are going to be good, but I would be surprised if we see Swift take an enormous step forward. I'm thinking, okay, he could do this for the rest of the season. I'm not expecting a huge step, even with Campbell saying, hey, he's going to get some more work.
Now, what are you thinking, Eric? Because as soon as I said DeAndre Swift, I saw you start smiling ear to ear. It seemed like you got pretty excited about this guy. What is DeAndre Swift? Is he the next Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara type player in the NFL?
Well, he's on my fantasy team, so he's been doing very well for me.
That's why you're smiling.
And I drafted him. I'm just like, okay, we'll see. I've always liked him. There are a lot of people that are kind of weird. I heard some people say like he's somebody that could definitely kind of be on the come up in fantasy football. So I took their advice and I drafted him, and it's been working out well. He was a guy who I was extremely high on coming out of Georgia. Thought he had a terrific overall skill set. He's an open field nightmare. And we saw week 1 against my 49ers where he had some runs up the middle that were really good, but then he also hurt us in the screen game and ended up going off and scoring the touchdown. So it's interesting to see how productive he's been with a team that has been down a whole lot. And you wouldn't necessarily think that the running back would get a lot of action, but that hasn't hurt him at all, and he's been doing very well.
And yeah, we saw that last year with James Robinson. We saw when Christian McCaffrey came into the league that their teams weren't great, but the offense just ran through them. And despite, just getting a few wins on the year, they were still very productive from a fantasy standpoint. Now, Eric, the next question I have for you, this is about Allen Robinson. And I just want to know, what should we be concerned about Allen Robinson? Throughout his entire career, he's been on bad teams with bad quarterbacks and still just puts up 1,000 yards, 150 targets every single year. This year feels a little bit different. Should we start being a little concerned about him? Are you thinking about maybe benching him in fantasy football?
It's going to continue to be difficult, if they can't, figure it out at the quarterback position. I actually think, and I think most people probably wouldn't disagree with me right now, is the best thing for him is Andy Dalton. And who would have thought that? We'll see. And sometimes with these quarterbacks, especially, Justin Fields coming out of college, had a tendency to hold on to the ball a little bit too long. Well, in the NFL, they're coming a little quicker. Everything happens faster, and you got to get the ball out of your hands. And we saw him struggle with that. I think that's something that he'll continue to struggle with and progressively get better as the season goes on. But right now, it's probably going to hurt more fantasy teams than help them because of the inconsistency at the quarterback position, unless Dalton comes back. But there also is the chance that, Justin Fields throws the ball downfield and there's a big play and maybe a touchdown. And I mean, that can help kind of skew some numbers from a fantasy standpoint, but on a consistent basis, I'm a little out on Allen Robinson right now.
And I'm with you. And I tried saying that in the offseason, and everyone just wanted to say, Justin Fields, best quarterback that he's ever played with. He's going to catch 2,000 yards this year. But we saw Andy Dalton in Cincinnati would just throw the ball to A.J. Green nonstop.
Right.
Like, A.J. Green could be triple covered, and he's still throwing it up there and letting his guy make a play. And I think that's what Andy Dalton wants to do with Allen Robinson as well. I don't know if Justin Fields, you don't see rookies really have confidence in the receivers like that. They want to throw to the open guy. They don't want to trust somebody to make a play.
Right.
But let me ask you the last question, Marco, before we get to predictions on this one. David Montgomery is off to a slow start. He was off to a slow start last year and then finishes one of the best running backs in the NFL. So do you expect that to happen again this year, where maybe he's off to this slow start and can turn on the Jets as the season goes on?
Yeah, I really do. I mean, the crazy thing that people don't really talk about too much is, a lot of the end of the schedule is very similar to what he's getting this year. It's a lot of the division opponents. So I was looking at his schedule, I think last week, and I think there's maybe 2 games that I'm like, okay, that'll be tough, but the rest of his schedule is so nice. He's way more decisive as a runner this year. It looks like he isn't really messing around too much with the east to west stuff. And so I really like him. I think in fantasy, he could be a nice, second half season guy. And he could be winning a lot of people some championships again.
Yeah, and like you said, he looks not only more decisive, but he looks slimmer, he looks faster, he
He's
looks
improved his
stronger.
footwork.
Yeah, I mean, he is doing everything better right now on the football field, and it's exciting to see. So, I've actually, I'm trying not to be a homer here, but I'm picking the Bears in this one. I think the Bears are going to win this game. I think that they really need this at home against the Lions. What do you think, Rocky? I see you kind of grimacing there. I don't think you're agreeing with me.
I mean, I believe in golf right now, where golf is a little bit more than Justin Fields, and that's not to say down the line I won't like Justin Fields a lot more. He was my QB1 in this class, so I think he has
Mhm.
tremendous talent. But what we're seeing right now is there's going to be some ups and downs with his play until he starts to see the field better. Now, maybe the recipe is playing against a poor defense, and that'll just help him. But it's a little bit hard to project that in this game. So I would lean towards Detroit, and Detroit has played well in
They have.
moments and in spurts, as opposed to Fields. The last game in his only start didn't look great. We'll see, because Andy Dalton, there's a chance he might play this week. So
Right. And
that could
let's
change
not
things.
forget that the Lions were a 66-yard field goal away from pulling out a win over the Ravens last week. So
Right.
I think the Lions are a lot better than their record shows. Marco, who do you got winning this one? Bears or
Yeah, gosh,
Lions?
I want to pick our Bears, man, but I can't do it. I'm going to pick the Lions here. I think, for me, when I look at this, I don't even know if it matters a ton who the quarterback is for this week, in the sense of the Lions are playing with, some fire in their bellies, man. They are scrapping by and making nice plays and doing a lot with a little. And the Bears just looked, last week, outside of the play calling, they're unmotivated right now. Like, unless we see a big change in what the Bears offense is believing in their coaching staff and Bill Lazor and Matt Nagy, I just don't see a way that they're like excited to play this game. And against a team that's fighting in every game, I got to go Lions.
Yeah. Very, very fair. And this is why I don't put money on the Bears, because I feel like I struggle to analyze them fairly, because they're so near and dear to my heart that I purposely stay away from betting money on the Bears. But got to talk about the game tonight a little bit before we sign off here. And, the big thing that everybody's talking about is Joe Mixon had one game last year that he went absolutely beast mode, and that was against the Jacksonville Jaguars, who he gets to face off again tonight. So he's been steady so far this year. But Crocky, let me ask you, could he have one of those huge, I don't know if it's going to be 3 touchdowns, 150 yards again, but do you expect him to just eat Jacksonville alive tonight?
Jacksonville is poor, but I don't know. Everything's been so up and down. This was a weird game. Once I saw this was the game, the Thursday night game, I started to look at like just storylines, and I think everything came back to me with, does Jamar Chase catch another pass downfield? And can Joe Burrow have time to feel comfortable? Because it seems like throughout the season so far, he hasn't. He's been really uncomfortable. I think Mixon is definitely going to get his touches, and knowing kind of this scheme and where their coach comes from, and kind of that McVay Shanahan tree and how he wants to set things up, you would think everything would go through the run game, and that could benefit Joe Mixon. But I don't know, man. Like, I don't
I'm with
know.
you. No, man, I get it. A lot of people aren't feeling this take, and you and I, we agree on a lot of takes, and this is one too. Everybody's expecting Mixon to go nuts today, but I think we're going to see a lot from Joe Burrow. We get we get the national championship rematch right now between Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence, and I think that they're going to be airing it out. I think that this is I think that Joe Burrow is more likely to throw for 400 yards tonight than Joe Mixon is to rush for 100. I think that they're going to be throwing the ball a lot. And that's the question I got for you, Marco, is so far through his first 3 games, Jamar Chase has caught a 30-yard touchdown in every single matchup. Crazy to think that that's how you're starting your career. Does he keep that streak going tonight and make it 4 games?
Yeah, I think we do. I think we see it again. Like Crocky is saying, like, this Jags defense is below average, to be nice. Like, it's not something that you need to be worried about. Especially Thursday night football. These games have been weird. They're always kind of weird. And I think Jamar Chase is just going to be able to outduel some of these guys. And they just got rid of CJ Henderson too. And so, yeah, I don't know really what you're going to expect from this Jaguars defense, especially in the secondary. So I could totally see Jamar Chase doing it this week.
I think so. Last question I have, and I'm going to ask both of you the same question before we sign off here. We didn't know who the lead receiver was going to be in Jacksonville before the season started. And now it's looking like it's going to be Marvin Jones, but I don't know if I'm buying that for the whole year. So, Eric, you could start us off here. between Marvin Jones, Laviska Shenault, DJ Chark, who is going to lead the team in passing yards tonight? Or I'm sorry, receiving yards tonight.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna go with Marvin Jones. It seems like that's the guy that's kind of clicking, and he's the pro. He's been the guy that has been consistent throughout his career. At some points, you might say underrated. You want to lean towards a Chalk who, he's been the guy who has been on the up and up, and is like, okay, we're waiting for that breakout year, and thought maybe with Trevor Lawrence it could be this year. But yeah, I'm definitely going to lean towards Marvin Jones with leading the team. Now, Shenault, he's intriguing because they just figure out different ways to get the ball in his hands, almost like a Deebo Samuel. But yeah, I'm going with Marvin Jones.
And I think that Deebo Shenault comparison is spot on. You see a lot of behind the goal or behind the line of scrimmage type of work, and they try to get manufactured plays for him. But Marvin Jones is just the complete receiver that somehow for like the 5th year in a row, we're still sleeping on him. So Marco, who do you have leading the team in receiving yards tonight? And then let's get your prediction for tonight's game.
Yeah, I'm with you guys here. I think it's Marvin Jones. I think he's one of the things that just hasn't been broken in this offense, one of the few things. And so why would they mess with that? So I think it is going to be Marvin Jones tonight. And then I got the Bengals tonight. So
I'm with the Bengals as well. Crocky, we going 3 for 3 on this? You taking the Bengals over Jacksonville tonight?
Taking the Bengals.
All right. Love to hear it. Well, why don't you guys go ahead one more time, let everyone know where they can find you on social media, what shows, articles, whatever you're working on right now. Now's the chance to plug that. Marco, start us off.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Marco_14P. You could subscribe to our YouTube channel at 14 Personnel. We're dropping content pretty regularly. And one of my main co-hosts at Justin_14P is a good time to follow on Twitter as well.
Yeah, you guys are both a lot of fun on Twitter. Definitely recommend that. Crocky, let everyone know where they can find you before we sign off here.
Yeah, at Eric_Crocker on Twitter. I'm the host of Locked On 49ers. I'm the host of Locked On NFL Draft, so I'm getting into that. So make sure you guys check out those shows, subscribe, make sure you guys hit that download button so I can put some money in my pockets. But yeah, I appreciate everybody for checking this out.
Of course,
thanks for having me on too.
Yeah, definitely subscribe to the YouTube. Help my man get his bag as we're all trying to do out here. Be sure to tune in next week. I bring this show to you every Thursday afternoon. Next week, I'll be with CBS's Jamie Eisenberg, and I will also be with FanDuel's Jessica Gridiron. So be sure to check that out as we dive into some Week 5 matchups. I'm Dave Kluge, and thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of The Launchpad.